Greetings and salutations, young true believers. So, I wanted to talk to you today about Sarah Fine's Philosophy Bites interview. She's talking about a very topical, very timely uh, issue for we Americans, and that's immigration. And specifically, she asked, do states have the right to exclude people from coming in? Um, and she cites several arguments. She gives her opposition their day in court, which is again good philosophical practice. That's exactly what you should do, right? And she considers, the first argument she considers comes from perhaps uh, the bureaucrats or the politicians who run the state, something to the effect of, well, it's the state's business to govern and the role or duties of the citizens to obey, and so we, as their elected officials or what have you, um, we have an obligation to set the parameters for what people can and can't do in our state, and that includes the right to exclude. But as Fine points out, a lot of the rights, so-called rights, that states used to make appeal to don't necessarily hold up much anymore. For example, in a democratic nation, uh, no one would believe, no one would accept the argument that the state has the right to uh, say you can't leave California and live in Florida, right? Or you can't leave New Jersey and move to Oregon, right? That doesn't seem to be consistent with the democracy. Also, it used to be a case that obviously states passed laws governing the sale and distribution of human beings themselves. We don't think of that as the purview of states any longer. She then considers another argument. Say this is an argument you might hear commonly made by smaller nations, like say Iceland or Luxembourg or something. Well, we can't handle uh, a huge influx of immigrants who would completely shift the demographics and the economics of our nation. That might be the case, but for a smaller nation, but we'll consider that in a second. But for a larger nation like the United States, this argument just doesn't really seem to hold up much. Um, Also, there's a question of, well, look, is your national identity, right? Uh, is that your right to that as a state? Is that more important than the rights of people who are being oppressed and need a place to live and desperately want to get out of places like Yemen or Syria? So the third nation, or the third argument she considers uh, is a common one. Well, look, the state has an obligation to protect its citizens. We want the state to protect us from huge shifts in religious, like, for example, you can imagine someone in a small Christian nation making an argument to the effect, we don't want a mass influx of millions of Muslim refugees from, say, Syria or Yemen, what have you. Um, it'll change the ethnic and religious makeup of the nation. Well, again, that same criticism that we considered earlier applies here too, right? Is it the case that and it's not even a right, it's your desire to see your nation remain, say, Christian majority? Does that trump the rights of people who are fleeing violence, who just simply want to live, to continue to exist, right? Um, and as Fine points out in the interview, and this is another very good argument. This one's a little bit, you don't hear this one made quite as much, but I think it's a really good argument. Um, there's no such thing typically for any given nation on the face of this planet anymore as monoculture, right? Um, Even within, say, we'll use her example, her nation, the UK, right? There's the Welsh culture, the English culture, the Scottish culture, the Irish culture in North Ireland, Northern Ireland. So there's no uniformity of culture, and obviously, in a huge nation like the United States, right? We have Native American culture, Black culture, uh, Hispanic culture, a lot of different subcultures that make up the larger American culture. So there's no single culture that's going to disappear if we have an influx of immigrants. In fact, America really does do uh, a pretty good job of absorbing all of its cultures into its own unique identity. So, long and short of it is, a lot of these arguments against immigration simply just do not stand up well under scrutiny. But be sure to post your comments in this week's discussion thread and let me know what you think about Fine's views.